we will deviate from what we spoke about last time. And since Rosh Hashanah is right up ahead, I have been asked to speak about Rosh Hashanah. And I think that it's tantamount to an obligation, because Rosh Hashanah is an extremely critical noise, Yontif. And I think that we should have some kind of idea about what Rosh Hashanah is really about. Rosh Hashanah is a very unique Chag, very unique Yontif, very different than other Yom Tovim. It is different not only in terms of its message, but it's different in terms of its mechanism. What do we all know about Rosh Hashanah? What we know about Rosh Hashanah is that there comes a certain period of the year, the first month of the year is called Tishrei. And the Hebrew year has 12 months, just like the solar year. And the months follow the lunar calendar. They follow the moon for very specific reasons, because the mazel of the Jews are connected to the phases of the moon in different ways, whereas the mazel of the goyim are connected to the sun. We will not expand on why that is or what that means. But we have a lunar calendar, and there are 12 months to that calendar, except that the days of the year are not the same as the days of the solar year. Since the lunar month is tends to be shorter than the solar month, after a while we begin to lose time. What we would find would be that the months of the lunar year would begin to occur earlier and earlier, so that Tishrei, which normally falls out in fall, will begin sometimes to fall out in the summer, and spring gradually will begin to recede, you see, as against the solar year. And the Torah says specifically that should not be. The Torah says that even though the lunar months are shorter than the solar months, I do not want them to recede, but I want them still to follow in the structure of the solar year. And the only way that that's done is by adding in a leap year. I think 7 times out of every 19 years. We add in a leap year, and that leap year is Adar. Adar is repeated twice. Adar Aleph and Adar Beis. The month of Adar is repeated twice. And strategically, that addition of Adar sees to it that the lunar year essentially runs like the solar year. Rosh Hashanah occurs on the first day of the first month. Now the year starts with Tishrei. That's the first month, Tishrei. Corresponds to the sign of Libra. And it's not, although that may sound somewhat humorous, it is not humorous, because, just as an aside, the months of the year, the lunar months of the year, according to Torah, are exactly correspondent to the zodiacal signs. Now, even though all of us have different opinions about astrology and different aspects about it, I'll let you know an interesting secret. There was once a time, a long time ago, when there were men who were really capable of discerning that which would occur in our world by looking at the zodiacal signs. Even though there are people, most of us, there are people who are into astrology, and there are many people who are not into astrology. It's some kind of... No, none of us are. Some kind of, just avocation of some sort. There is an aspect that when the Rebbeinu created the world, and when he determined certain events to occur, the hashgacha, that hashgacha is reflected in astrological signs, except that the chokhmah, or the knowledge which is needed to understand that, has been lost. That is what the Torah says about astrology. In essence, astrology itself is true. It is true that you can read about what will happen from the stars and from the positions of the planets. in the zodiac. It is true. Except that the ability to do that is lost. It no longer exists in mankind, just like the ability to perform miracles and prophecy was taken away. That chokhmah was taken away also. So people who claim to be astrologers today, right, or have some knowledge of astrology, have like a shadow of what was once known about that subject. But the subject is true. Now why it is true, how the Baruch Hashem indicates the hashgacha through the zodiac, and why it is like that, is far afield. It has to do with the creation of the world itself. But that's essentially what it is. So that the months of the year, Tishrei, if you will notice, follow exactly the zodiac. And Libra, what is the sign of Libra? The scales. What is Tishrei? Tishrei is the month of judgment. You find it, it is not so. There's an exact correspondence. If you run down every one of the months, you will find that many of the Chagim correspond to the sign itself. For example, Nisan, which is the month when Pesach takes place, corresponds to Aries, the ram. And the entire Yetzias Mitzrayim corresponds to the Akedah Yitzchak, which is from the ram. So you'll find many, many strange things. Stephen, when the Torah is given, corresponds to Gemini, the twins, and so on. And there are reasons why that is. So it's not like you cannot simply debunk it like it's not. I mean, what people know today is nothing. But there was one such a chokhmah called astrology, just like there was a chokhmah called chokhmah hayad, the ability to read the hand, and so on, and many and chokhmahs of the black arts itself, kishuv, witchcraft, which did exist, and there are chokhmahs like that, but all these things do not exist anymore. They were taken away from the world. So, Rosh Hashanah starts on the first day of Tishrei, Aleph of Tishrei, the first month of the year. Now, what is Rosh Hashanah? It's the day of judgment. There's an incredible thing that goes on in the heavens on Rosh Hashanah. Very powerful. And what happens is, suddenly, the entire structure in the heavens is altered. And what becomes critical is one institution. Now, what is that institution? Now, I'm using mundane, worldly terminology to describe what goes on in the heavens, in the Shemayim. And in a metaphorical sense, it does go on. There are essentially many institutions in the Shemayim, in the Neshamas. But the main institution that we are concerned with are two. Bezdin. What is a Bezdin? A Bezdin is a court of law. There are two different Bezdins in the Shemayim. One is called the Bezdin of Mishpat, or the court of justice. And the other is called the Bezdin of Yichus, or Rachamim, the court of mercy. They are different Bezdins. Essentially, these Botei Dinim, these courts are open a great deal of the time. When they are open, essentially what happens is that the world is being judged, nations are being judged, and the way they are being judged is similar in structure to the way it's done here. Because the Baruch Hashem set up the mechanism, the spiritual mechanism, to reflect the way it is here. So that there's a prosecuting attorney who is the Satan. The Satan is the main prosecuting attorney, or Satan, in English the Satan, and it's his function to go up and to accuse the Jews, or accuse whoever is liable of things that did wrong. The Beis Din then decides on the merits of the case, of the accusation, and depending on the merits of the accusation, consequences occur. Now, even though those consequences may occur so that a certain decision is handed down, that decision many times is then transferred to the next Beis Din, which is the Beis Din of Rachamim, and then they consider how to implement it, whether or not they want to implement with full force of din, or they want to mitigate it in some way through mercy. The essence, really, of Rosh Hashanah lies in the fact that this Beis Din is closed, and that's the only one that's open. That means that we are all in a lot of serious trouble. It is very serious, because the Rebbeinu Shalom is then seen in his judicial power, and that is extraordinarily serious, because the world must be judged to a fine hair on its deeds. Now, the problem is that the world in general, and Klal Yisrael specifically, are not worthy, really, to stand in front of a prosecuting attorney, because a prosecuting attorney who has any type of merit can literally wipe them away. Every Jew is filled with chatoim, it's filled with sins, it's filled with all kinds of deeds of self-centeredness, of selfishness, of cruelty to other people, acts of disdain and rebellion to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And these acts and deeds are specifically examined on that day. And on the basis of those acts, there is no other recourse. Once the decision then comes of what to do to the people who are responsible for those deeds, there is no recourse to mercy on that day. Which means that Rosh Hashanah is an enormously powerful day. It is a day of great trepidation. You don't realize that when you go to shul, or even if you don't go to shul, it's not relevant. There is a specific prosecuting attorney up there who is looking down at you, and your name comes up on the slot. It comes up, and it's passed in front of the Beis Din Shemala. It's passed in front of the chief judge, the Rebbeinu Shalom, the aspect of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and then it's decided what will be done to you. There is no way around it. There is absolutely no way around it. Your name will always come up. And it's examined with a fine tooth comb. Now it's true, there are malachim. There are also agents and forces who attempt to defend you. Just like the Sultan is interested in prosecuting you, there are those malachim who are interested in defending you. But the problem is that once you fall under the accusation, there is no other recourse. That is a very frightening aspect. This is what happens in Rosh Hashanah. This is what happens. The first day of Tishrei, no Beis Din of Rachamim. There is no mercy on that day. There is only din. That's what happens in Rosh Hashanah. What does it mean to us as Jews? On Rosh Hashanah, everyone is judged. Jews and Goyim. There is no difference. The entire world is judged. Not only all people, but all creatures. Every single entity which exists in all creation is judged, meaning that the specific position and the course of future for that entity is determined on that day. What's determined on that day is not only what will happen to each person, whether he will live or die, whether he will be rich or poor, healthy or sick, and so on. But even animals, which animal will live and which one will die? Which chicken will wind up on your table and which one will not? Which insect will be crushed and which will not? Which fly will be eaten by which spider and which will not? Everything is determined on that day because it's all interconnected with human activity in the most intricate fashion. The problem is, the Jews, what do we do with a day which is strict justice? How do we avoid the ultimate penalty? So the Bunisham said, and what he did was, he gave the Jews a specific mitzvah. A specific mitzvah. It is the mitzvah of shofar. And the Bunisham said that with the mitzvah of shofar, you have in your hand an instrument which can undo the absolute quality of justice. That is the essence of shofar. But the question is, why is that the essence of shofar? What is it about a shofar that's able to undo the quality of absolute justice? In other words, even though Klal Yisrael is determined, even though the Jews are determined, or a section of Jews are determined to die, to be destroyed, the mitzvah of hearing the shofar, of blowing the shofar, and of hearing it, in some way can intervene into this process and stay the judgment without the bezin of Rachman being opened. Now the question is why? Is the mitzvah of shofar just another mitzvah? Well, it's a mitzvah, and when you do it, there's a certain merit. Fine, we blow shofar, so there's a certain merit. So fine. So what happens is, let's say we have a scale, right? Right? And on this side are the mitzvahs, and these sides are the chatonim, the sins. Okay? We have our scales. And let's say the chatonim weigh it down. Let's say the chatonim are stronger, so that the aspect of justice demands retribution. The blowing of the shofar technically should be just another mitzvah, which means it should be added to this scale. But that's all it is a mitzvah. And as a mitzvah, it's simply the counterpart to the transgression. For example, let's say you do a certain mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah. You keep Rosh Hashanah, you observe it. That's a mitzvah. So that should help counter the other side of the balance of transgressions, of chatoim. You see. Is that what shofar does? Does the Banishim say, I'm going to give you an extra mitzvah, I'm going to give you the mitzvah of shofar, and with that mitzvah, it will assist in tying the balance down towards this way? No. That's not the function of shofar. Why? Because it is simply one mitzvah. And what happens if you're loaded up with chatoim, you're loaded up with transgressions? Why should one mitzvah of shofar suddenly undo the preponderance of chatoim? You see? So the power of the shofar doesn't lie simply in the fact that it's just another mitzvah. Because if it's just another mitzvah, in and of itself would not have the power to undo the damage which is done by all the chatoim. Yet the Banishim says that the shofar, the blowing and the hearing of the shofar, will have the strength to mitigate the din, the mishpat. And the question is, how does it do that? From this we see that a shofar is different than all other mitzvahs. It is. Because in essence, it's not really added to the scale. Its power is far more effective than just being added to the scales and attempting to weigh the balance between mitzvahs and chatonim. The shofar has a whole different concept, and it's wrapped up very much with the way the Baruch Hashem wants Jews to relate to Rosh Hashanah. The shofar. What is the shofar really? It's the horn taken from a ram. That's where it comes from. And the blowing, the sounds which emanate from it, corresponds to crying sounds, b'chiyas, crying. If you listen to the wail of a shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it mimics the way a human being cries. The truah, which is one sound, is like a long wail, like a long cry. The tia. The truah, which is a staccato type of sound, if you ever listen sometimes to crying, it's like a person cries in staccato type of sound and catches his breath each time. So that the sounds of the shofar mimic human crying process. And the Baruch Hashem wants to take the horn of a ram and cry with it. And with those crying sounds, effect some kind of transformation in the heavens above. Why? The shofar, is, we are told, is there to bring a certain remembrance. And the remembrance that it's supposed to bring is the Akedas Yitzchak. What was the Akedas Yitzchak? What was the Akedas Yitzchak? Well, yes, I'm going to get into that. It's a rhetorical question. What does the Akedas Yitzchak have to do with Rosh Hashanah? Let's look at what happened at the time of the Akedas Yitzchak. The Akedas Yitzchak in English means the binding of Isaac. That's what it means. Akedas Yitzchak is the binding because what happened was, and let's go over the story, the Baruch Hashem told Avram Avinu that from him will come forth a nation. And the Baruch Hashem said, we can understand a little more sophisticated from less to Shum what happened when the Baruch Hashem talked to Avram. But essentially he said to Avram the following: from you will come forth a new nation. And this nation will come from your son Yitzchak. Even though you have another son Yishmael, from a different wife, it will not be from that one. It will be from Yitzchak. And this nation will carry on the purpose of all creation. And we have said, what is that purpose? The purpose of all creation is that a person should do mitzvahs and thereby develop an intimate relationship with the Baruch Hashem, to come to be aware of the will of God, and by doing that, bring down a very new kedusha, an extra amount of holiness in his neshama. Once that is done, his neshama will then have the power to transform this world into a world of Olam Haba. At the outset, as we have said before, all men had that ability. From Adam Rishon, from the first man, all men had the ability, by doing certain mitzvahs that they had, to literally transform physical reality into a spiritual world. Most men, in the time of Avram, were Rishoyim. So the Baruch Hashem said to Avram, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to change the world now. And I will simply retain the purpose of mankind, the purpose of Adam, which is to build a spiritual world from this physical one in your hands. It will be in your hands. And it will be in your children's hands coming from Yitzchak. But the Baruch Hashem said, before I do that, I have to test you. I have to see to it that you are worthy of being chosen to create the nation, to become the father, the Av of the nation who will represent that purpose in the world, that exclusive purpose in the world. Because the purpose of creating an Olam Haba from an Olam Hazeh, the purpose of changing a physical world to a spiritual world, was only given to Avram and was taken away from all the other people. And that's why all the other people became Goyim. But the Baruch Hashem says, I will test you. And the Baruch Hashem gave him 10 different nisyonos. 10 times was he tested. 10 times. And they were not light tests. One of the earlier ones was that he was thrown into a fiery furnace by Nimrod, who said, either you bow down to the idols which we have, or I will throw you into the furnace. And he threw Avram into the furnace. And there was a miracle, and Avram was saved. But one of the earlier nisyonos, tests of Avram, was to see whether or not he'd give up his life rather than worship idols. The 10th and last of the nisyonos, the greatest one, was called the Akedah Yitzchak. What was that nisyon all about? Basically, it was about the following. The Baruch Hashem says, after Yitzchak was already 40 years old, the Baruch Hashem says, I would like you to do something. I would like you to go up to the mountain, Har HaMoriah, up to the mountain. He didn't tell him the name of the mountain right away. That, by the way, is the mountain which the temple, the wall stands on. The mountain where the Beit HaMikdash is on top of, with the wall, where the western wall, is the same mountain where the Akedah Yitzchak took place. And the Baruch Hashem said to Avram, I want you to go to this mountain, I want you to ascend it, and then I want you to take your son Yitzchak and bind him, and I want you to sacrifice him like a korban, like a korban olah, like a sacrifice. Because I want you to slaughter your own son in my name. That's what he told Avram. As soon as Avram heard this, and he understood this, he took his son, and he told the son what was involved, and both of them concurred, and they went together. Early in the morning, Avram got up. He didn't get up late in the afternoon to do this. The next day, early in the morning, he went up to do the Rosh Hashanah of the Baruch Shalom. And he went to the Har HaMoriah, he went to the mountain, and he tied Yitzchak up. That's why it's called Akedah. He tied him up. And he took the knife, a long knife, and he raised his hand, and he was about to bring it down, when suddenly he heard another voice saying, stop. Don't do it. It was only a test. And the Baruch Hashem said to him, it was only a test, and from this I see that you truly fear God. You are a real Yireh Shamayim. You truly fear God. Avram then loosened the ropes on Yitzchak, and lo and behold, there was another ram in the bush that was caught by the horns, and he took that ram and he put that on the altar instead, and he sacrificed that to the Baruch Hashem. Because of that deed, because of what Avram did at that time, the Baruch Hashem says, now you will be the father of a new nation. And Yitzchak, who submitted himself to being the korban, to being the sacrifice, was told never to leave the land of Israel. And Yitzchak was never allowed to go outside of the borders of the land of Israel. Because Yitzchak, in becoming a sacrifice, had attained the level of the kedusha, or the sanctity of a korban itself. Hence he was never allowed to leave the land of Israel. Great deeds, awesome deeds, an awesome thing. Tell a father to go sacrifice his son. Mind-boggling. And the Baruch Hashem says, now I know that you fear me. Was it really mind-boggling? What really was the test of Avram? What really was he told to do? The fact is he was told to slaughter his son. No question about it, it was an incredible thing. The fact that he was willing to do it. No question about it. But, is this really something which is so unique? No. It's not that unique. Why? Because right across the valley, on the other side of the valley of Moloch, the Goyim were doing the same thing. In the valley of Moloch, they were taking their kids and they would sacrifice to Avodah Zarah. That's what they did. So we see an amazing thing. That same thing which is the act of Avram was being done by all the other Goyim. Or at least by this nation of Goyim who were doing the same thing. So I can understand the Goyim would say, look, there's no question what you have done is a very noteworthy thing. But the point is, what is so outstanding about it or unique, really? If the Goyim were able to do the same thing for false gods. So we ask ourselves, what really then was the great deed of Avram that was so spectacular that from then on he became the father of all the Jews? And he was worthy to father a nation that would bring Olam Haba to the world. When we really look into it, we see that there was something else involved. That the reason why the Rebbeinu Shalom was impressed with the Yiras Shamayim of Avram was much more than the fact that he was willing to kill his son. Far more than that. Let's go back and let's look at what the Rebbeinu Shalom told Avram at the beginning when he told him what the covenant would be. He said, I am going to exchange all mankind for you and for your descendants, so that you will accept and take on the original purpose that was given to Adam Rishon. In your son Yitzchak will that purpose be acknowledged. Suddenly, years later, the Rebbeinu Shalom turns around and says, wait a minute, I've got another idea. I want you to take Yitzchak and I want you to kill him. Wait a minute, what is going on over here? First the Rebbeinu Shalom tells me that I have been chosen and Yitzchak has been chosen to be what? To be the person who will bear the redemption of mankind, and that through Yitzchak lies the entire salvation of all human race, because from him will continue the original tikkun, the original what? Purpose of Adam Rishon. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom turns around and he says, no, forget about it. This will not be what the situation will be. Instead, I want you to sacrifice Yitzchak. There is a clear contradiction in the logic of these two things. There's an inconsistency in what God told Avram. He told him to do the two opposite things at the same time. What does the Rebbeinu Shalom really want to know from Avram? Really? What he wants to know is, what kind of man is Avram? We are all told that if a bad event happens to a person, then he makes a bracha. That bracha is bracha to Hashem, dayan emet. The Rebbeinu Shalom is said to be the true judge. In other words, what we have to do is, even if something bad happens to us, we have to acknowledge the fact that everything which happens in the world happens because of some concept of justice. The Rebbeinu Shalom does not do that which is beyond or out of justice. God is a just God. To believe that God is a just God, to believe in the law of justice, the fact that evil begets evil and good begets good, is essentially something which is within the domain of logic itself. Hence, by the fact that Avram believes that God is a God of justice is a very important thing. But that's essentially what his belief was. What the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to know was, does Avram believe that I am a God even above justice? Meaning, that even though justice demands in certain cases, you see, through a certain type of consequence, a certain type of disposition, but I have the ability, through my chokhmah, through my wisdom, through my power, you see, to bring about a redemption and to bring about a salvation even against the claims of the judicial process. And that I can satisfy the judicial claims and still allow mankind to survive. Am I a God who's beyond cause and effect? Or am I a God who's restricted to cause and effect? This is what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to know from Avram. What kind of God are we dealing with here? The Rebbeinu Shalom who created justice Is he restricted to that justice? Does anything the Baruch Hashem have to do follow a certain course of logic? And something which is discernible, which we can understand? Or is the Baruch Hashem capable of working in ways which are beyond logic, yet basically following the inner course of logic? And this is essentially what the Baruch Hashem wants to know from Avram. So what did the Baruch Hashem do? The Baruch Hashem gave Avram a contradictory mitzvah. On one side, the Baruch Hashem says that I will make from your child, from Yitzchak, a nation which will place mankind in what it's supposed to do. And on the other side, he says to Yitzchak, he says to Avram, I will now command you to destroy Yitzchak. So Avram is sitting down and saying, wait a minute, what kind of situation is this? What is going on here? This is absolutely illogical. So Avram is faced with this problem. What should I do? Should I listen to the first statement of God or to the second statement of God? The second statement of God, to kill Yitzchak, contradicts the first statement that Yitzchak is the forebear of what? Of the purpose of mankind. It's a contradiction. Which one do I listen to? That depends on what you think of God. If you think that God somehow is contained within contradictions and submits to the logical process of cause and effect, then it makes no sense. You see? So obviously you're not going to do something which is contradictory to the original statement. You say to the Baruch, make up your mind. Which way do you want it? Which way do you want it? Yordanish? Yes or no? Right or left? Don't drive me crazy. But if you realize that the Baruch Hashem is what? Is capable of giving two contradictory statements, and yet both, in some way, in some awesome way, are possible to emerge and not contradict each other. Then you believe in a Baruch Hashem who's beyond cause and effect, who's beyond system, beyond structure, beyond organization, beyond prediction. That the being of God is beyond all aspects of the reality as we know it. So Avram says, in that case, that's the Baruch Hashem I believe in. I believe that the Baruch Hashem is outside of his creation. He does not submit to cause and effect or the laws of logic. But that the Baruch Hashem who created logic can do things which seem to be palpably illogical. So I will therefore keep the second statement of what the Baruch Hashem said, and I will go and sacrifice Yitzchak. And I will do it with all haste. I will run to fulfill the commandments of the Baruch Hashem. That's what Avram was saying. So the Baruch Hashem says, now I know that you are real Jewish Shemayim. Now I know that you do what I say, not because they make sense. Now I know that you give tzedakah, not because what? It's logical. And it's common sense, it's sensible to help another human being. Now I know that you what? That you do chesed, and you do all the good deeds you do, and that's what you are careful in the way you treat other people. Not because that's the way civilization is built, or that's the way things should go, but I know that you do everything that you do. You do everything because of what I have said. You do what I say. Your love and fear for me is so great. You see, that the reason why you keep things, or the reason why you keep your deeds, is based on the fact that you want nothing more of life than to do my will, even though my will looks like it's totally contradictory. And I know now that even if I would command you to do things that are illogical, you would do it, because your faith in me is that great. So I know you are a real Yireh Shamayim. You fear God. You don't fear logic. You don't fear civilization. You fear God. You fear my will. That you will suspend logic, you will suspend law and order, you will suspend cause and effect if that's what I ask. This was the Nisayon of Avram. But wait, was it really a Nisayon? Really? Was it really a test? I don't really think so either. Because we all know that God is beyond logic. We know that the Baruch Hashem is outside of cause and effect. So all Avram had to do was sit down, think about the matter, and Avram was a bright person. He was able to think about it. Well, of course the Baruch Hashem is beyond it. I don't know what he's doing here. I have no idea. I have no idea how what? How Yitzchak on one side can be the forebear what? Of Israel, the Jews, and at the same time I'm told to kill him. I have no understanding how that works. It makes no sense. But the Baruch Hashem is beyond it. So therefore I will do this. Logic, Chokhmah, God is should have given Avram the ability to pass that test. So therefore, the truth of the matter is, why is it still a test? So we have to come on to another dimension. Because all the serious, every test that God gives you is not a test of logic. Never. Although it may appear that way. It's not a question of sitting down and figuring out what's right and what's wrong. More or less, most of the time, we know what's right and what's wrong. What the Buddha always gives us is a test on not what's true, but on what we want. There's a different parameter here. The Buddha said to Avram, kill your son, sacrifice him. So Avram sat down and thought about it. Wait a minute, it's a contradiction from what he said before. Well, yeah, but in some way it's got to make sense. But wait a minute. If he's telling me to kill Yitzhak, he's probably decided, the Buddha probably decided to make some other person the father of the Jews. He's decided probably to give this power, or this kuz, this merit to somebody else. And they will go ahead and become the father, of the nation that will bear the purpose of Of Adam Rishon and bring Olam Haba. So Avram was faced with a new thing here. Wait a minute. It's a question of what I want. You see, sure I want the world to get into a level of Olam Haba. Sure I want truth and justice to prevail in the end. But I want it to prevail through me. I want to be the big honcho here, if I may use the term. I want it to come because of my efforts. I don't want someone else to get the credit. The truth of the matter is, many times we think about it. We all want good things to happen. We want the world to be what? We go up and we say, I have something to contribute to the world. It is important for the world to become involved in new morality. And I understand what that morality is. Fine. But what happens if suddenly you're taken away from the position and somebody else comes up and gives the world that morality and you don't get the credit? Are you still willing to fight for that morality? Are you willing to fight for a principle, even though you will not get a shred of credit? Because it's the principle that's important? This is what the Buddha wanted to know from Avram. This is what he wants to know. He wanted to know if Avram saw God as above logic, but not only that, if he would allow his own feelings to in some way interfere with that decision. Because Avram would think like this. Wait a minute. 1 second. If I kill Yitzchak, then somehow the entire blessing will have been taken away from my hands. And I won't have it anymore. But wait a minute. But the Buddhism says I should do that, and it's not logical, but the Buddhism is beyond logic. Wait a minute. Maybe I should say that, forget about it. That in some way, this doesn't make sense. That there's got to be some kind of a logical thing, and I'll just listen to what the Buddha said the first time. That from Yitzchak will come the nation of Israel. What God wanted to see was whether or not Avram uses the pro and con of the situation based on what he wanted. If Avram wants to be the father of the Jews himself, then he will not listen to the Buddha Shalom. He will say, this is impossible. This is illogical. And the punishment is not illogical. So therefore, the desire of Avram to retain the credit would have forced him to the side that says the punishment is a logical being. And he would not have said something that's illogical. You see? Because the underlying motive was to keep the credit for himself. But if Avram would have said, it's not the credit that's important, it's the fact that mankind is redeemed and saved, even though it's not through my hands. That, once he comes to that knowledge, then he says, wait a minute, if that's true, even though this is illogical, but the Buddhism is beyond logic, and I have no right to what? To cancel out the second commandment. So it fundamentally depends on what Avram wants. Will we find this type of Nisayan? We find this kind of Nisayan by Moshe Rabbeinu also. And it's funny how the Buddhism always does this. When the Jews worship the golden calf, the Buddhism decided to destroy them all of them. So Moshe says, wait, you promised from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you promised our forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that you would not destroy the Jews. You see, that from them will come the ultimate redemption. So the Buddhism says, that's true, I did that. But that doesn't inhibit me from destroying all of them. So Moshe says, why? You destroy them all. What will be left? So the Buddhism says, You. You are from Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. You're Jewish. I'll make a new nation from you. We'll start from you. So Moshe thought for a second, and he said, no, I refuse. I refuse. I insist that you remember Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that you retain the original Shavua, and that you apply mercy and do not kill the Jews. So the Rebbe said, okay, because of your davening, because of your tefillah, because you must follow and you begged me to remember the schus, the merit of the forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, what great tzaddikim they were, I will not destroy Klal Yisrael. I will pay them back the sin of the golden calf throughout each generation. But I will not destroy them in totality because of your prayer. But was it the prayer of Moshe Rabbeinu that saved the Jews? No. What saved the Jews really was his unwillingness to what? To become the father of the Jews. Look at the extraordinary opportunity the Baruch Hashem said to him. Look what he could have thought. The Baruch Hashem says, I want to destroy all the Jews, and I want to make you. I want to make you the forefather of the Jews. So Moshe will think, that's incredible. That sounds interesting. If that's incredible, you think Moshe is going to stand up and stop davening for the Jews? Of course not. But it's the fact that Moshe turned it down, that Moshe turned down his own selfish interest. That the interest of the nation than his own credit and his own prestige. Because Moshe said, why is it that I didn't say to the Baruch Hashem, yes, sounds like a great idea? Because Moshe says, how can I be so selfish? When I go and I see the three of us, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, what am I going to say to them? How am I going to look them in the face? That I thought that my own self-honor is more important than the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. What am I going to say to them? How can I be so selfish as to allow my own honor and my own reputation and my own gedula, my own elevation at the expense of the Jewish nation? So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu says, I refuse whatsoever that the principle of what the Jews represent, that they represent the nation to fulfill the will of the Baruch Hashem in its entirety, that they represent an existence who attempts to come to know the Baruch Hashem and to develop an intimate contact with the Baruch Hashem. That principle is sacrosanct. And I must allow that principle to exist as it was. I cannot be selfish enough to say to the Baruch Hashem, do it through me. So we see that when the Baruch Hashem ultimately tests a tzaddik, a leader, he doesn't test them in what's right and what's wrong, what's logical and what's illogical. He tests them on self-interest. What do you want? You see, what's more important? Your elevation, your success, or the success of the idea itself? You see, the truth itself. And that's exactly how Avraham was tested. Avraham was tested in the exact same way. Because the Baruch Hashem wanted to see if he would listen to him, based on how Avraham would look, whether God was logical or illogical. But that would ultimately depend on what Avraham wanted. If he wanted to be the unique father of the Jews or not. That would, in one way or another, shift him to either side of the Nesorian, of the test. That's what Avraham was zircha. He merited to be who he was. Now the question is, what does that have to do with us? What does that have to do with us? Because what Avraham did was an extraordinary thing. What Avraham did is the following. He completely changed the entire process of what goes on in the Shemayim. As I have explained, in the Shemayim, there are two central institutions corresponding to the two hashgochas, or the two hanagas of the world. There's a central institution which governs the hashgocha of din, mishpat, justice, and in that case, that institution, or the malachim, up there, examine every living thing, every entity to see what will happen to it. That is the bezin, that has to do with mishpat. And then there's another institution that has to do with rachamim, with mercy. But how do the two relate? The two relate in the following way. First comes the summons to mishpat. At after there's a summons to Mishpat, then it transfers to the case of this Bezdin, and this Bezdin then decides how they'll deal with it, if they'll deal with it, in which way they'll deal with it. But it's always Mishpat first, Rachamim second. But there are two-step processes which occur consecutively. But what I have just said is that on Rosh Hashanah, the amazing thing is that this does not happen. On Rosh Hashanah, the Bezdin of Rachamim is closed, and only the Bezdin of Mishpat is open, which means that the only process that can go on is pure, absolute justice. When Avram did what he did, when he was Eilis ben Etzoyin, he altered the relationship of two Bate Dinim. How? Because since Avram was Eilis ben Etzoyin, since Avram withstood by himself the pressure of that Netzoyin, he earned a zchut according to the laws of justice. In what zchut? Avram said that I believe that the Bunishim is beyond logic, beyond din, and that the Bunishim has the ability to bring chesed, bring mercy, even in the face of justice. Once Avram showed that from his own Nesoyim, then Avram has a right, he has the right to go into this court, the one of Mishpat, on Rosh Hashanah and say, I demand mercy. Mercy then is dealt with in the court of Mishpat. An incredible thing. This court is still closed. The court of Rachamim is shut. But because of the Nesoyin of Avram, because of what he did, he has the right to demand by justice that just like he says, just like I was willing to what? Submerge my interest and submerge logic and justice. So to do your will. Because I believe you are beyond justice. You see, you are beyond what cause and effect is. And I submerged myself. I bend my will to your will. But what did I do? I said you are God above justice. That your mercy is so great that the mercy can actually come in the justice itself. I then have the right to go to the court of justice itself and demand mercy. So that the plea of mercy is heard in the court of justice. Do we see that? That's an entire alteration of whatever happened before. It's true. On Rosh Hashanah, what happens? As soon as Rosh Hashanah starts at night, this court opens, that closes. At night, they begin to examine very, very closely everything that goes on. And suddenly, a tremendous kitrut, a tremendous accusation goes up to the Baruch Shalom. And the Sultan says, I demand that the Jews be destroyed. I demand that the Jews be punished. I demand that the Jews be annihilated. Look at what they're doing down there. And the Baruch Shalom says, I hear what you say. Wait. Comes the dawn, and all the Jews get up and they go to shul. And suddenly you begin to hear the shofar. And the Baruch Shalom says, wait. I hear the shofar blowing. The shofar. And from the koyach of that shofar, Avram then goes inside the basin of Mishpat and says, I am here, you see, to defend the Jews on the basis of justice. That I gave my entire situation. I believe that you are God of mercy in the process of justice itself. That you are God beyond contradictions. I demand mercy in the court of justice. And suddenly the prosecuting attorney, the Sultan, becomes confused. Why is he confused? Because he's in an incredible dilemma. We all know that prosecuting attorneys and defense attorneys have strategies. And they all attempt to what? To in some way exclude evidence, or in some way manipulate evidence, to in some way deal with the situation. What does the Sultan want? The Sultan certainly wants to what? Accuse Israel. He has no intention of seeing Israel survive, you see. So therefore, he attempts to bring in all the evidence which essentially will be in favor of annihilating the Jews. But he is a Sultan, a prosecuting attorney. And since he is a prosecuting attorney, he must submit to justice. Which means that he must bring in all the evidence because that's what justice is about. Suddenly in comes Avom and in comes the Shofar, and the Sultan himself must introduce the evidence of the Akedis Yitzchak, so that the prosecuting attorney himself suddenly is forced to become a defense attorney and say, wait a minute, it's true that I demand annihilation, but since I represent pure justice, the Sultan says, I must also acknowledge the fact that the Akedis Yitzchak says that that justice must be mitigated. What is the condition of a prosecuting attorney who must at the same time be a defense attorney? Confusion. That's why the Medrash says that when we blow the shofar, the Sultan is mavulval. He becomes confused. What does that mean, he becomes confused? What is it? He didn't eat breakfast that morning? He went to sleep late at night? What does that mean, he's confused? What it means is that he is forced to introduce into the proceedings of justice claims against justice and claims for mercy. So here we see the unique essence of Rosh Hashanah. Very unique. That Rosh Hashanah is a day when the bed in the Vachamim is closed. Number one. But it is also a day, an incredible day, when the shofar, which is a reminder of the Akedis Yitzchak, is able to obtain mercy in the hands of justice itself. There is no other day in the year equal to Rosh Hashanah. No other day has that power but Rosh Hashanah. And therefore the shofar is the saving grace of the Jewish nation. So I say to you, the next time when you're in shul, when you hear that shofar, understand what's happening as those koilos are going out. As you hear that wailing sound, understand exactly what's being transpired. That literally, Klal Yisrael is being saved and redeemed because of what that shofar is, because of what Avraham and Yitzchak did a long time before, and that they're being saved in the very process of justice itself.
I hear what you're saying about building yourself in of what went on and the merit that has been forth. But how does that apply to us today? I mean, this has been going on for a few thousand years now, that every year Sutton goes in and does his thing, and then everyone bursts in and raises the flag. How do we see that happening today? I mean, the Sutton knows he's coming in the back door sooner or later anyway, so how do we really apply that in terms of understanding what's going on for us this year?
It's not a question that the Sutton knows. Each year is a new year. The Sutton is not... Let me explain you something. The Sutton is an old fellow, isn't he? Thousands of years old, correct? A very old fellow. No, he's not. He's not an old fellow at all. The Sutton has only what's called short-term memory. Why is that? Why is that? Because every time a person does a chait, every time he does a sin, what happens is a malach is created. A new malach is created. That malach represents that sin. When the Sutton comes up on Rosh Hashanah and begins to deal with those chatoim and those sins, what it is the mind of the Sutton incorporates only those malachim which are involved in accusations. You see, malachim which are involved in accusations a long time ago and no longer exist, or those debts were paid, disappear. The consciousness of the Sutton is a ephemeral consciousness. It's a consciousness which exists right now. The Sutton is able to look at the condition of mankind and understand exactly the balance for the world. Now, he processes the present. He has an incredible awareness of the present, down to its most minute, because his mind sees every aspect of the present. But that's all his mind sees. His mind only sees the present, because his mind changes from year to year. Every year it's a new consciousness. So it's not like the Sutton remembers that Avraham is coming in. Not at all. You see. The certain sense, from my understanding, my consciousness, which is what? Gathered from all the Ketugim, all the Malachim, which arrange themselves and tell me this. These are all my private detectives. All these Malachim running out. The billions and billions of Malachim are my private eyes. They're my private detectives. It's my investigative arm. And all these people tell me exactly what the balance sheet is at this point. But the Sultan only knows what those detectives tell him. The Sultan knows no more than what his Mekasikim tell him. And that's it. And he knows what he has to do. That he has to go up there on Rosh Hashanah and attempt to bring justice. True justice. So his consciousness is what is contained and constricted to the present. And suddenly, in comes Avon. But Avon was not recognizable to the Sultan, because it's a different Sultan from year to year. Yes?
Are the Malachim that are created from mitzvahs also present in that course?
Yes.
And why
That's
why
this
are
side.
they not why don't they constitute a quality of rachamim in the court of din? They're present.
They don't. They constitute a quality of din, of justice. There are scales here.
So it's just like totally the tallying.
It's a tallying. It's a tallying. That's all it is. All those malachim that have to do with mitzvahs come up, and they simply tally against all those malachim that have to do with averis. That's all it is. That's not rachamim. That's justice. Yeah. But since Klal Yisrael is always in a position where this part of the scale is way down, how do I know that? How do I know that this part of the scale is lower than the mitzvah scale? Because we're in Golas. Because if it wasn't, we would have Mashiach a long time ago. You see. So since that's the situation, what do? You see. All the mitzvahs, obviously, it is obviously even determined that all the mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael has done is not enough to redeem Klal Yisrael from Kitro. It is not enough. That's obvious. If it was, we wouldn't be in where we are now. So the question is, if it's not enough, that means that the kitrig or the accusation dominates. Oh, if the accusation dominates, we're all in very big trouble. You see. But we exist on a day without chesed, really. So we're in very, very big trouble. That's where the shofar comes in. But the shofar has the ability, like no other mitzvah, not simply to add another notch on the side of the mitzvah, but rather to intervene into the court itself and demand a new process within the judicial process. That the judicial process itself acknowledge the fact that chesed must exist and the Baruch must overlook the chatoim for another year. Yes, but the mitzvah of shofar is on Rosh Hashanah. The mitzvah in the Torah of blowing shofar is on Rosh Hashanah only. What happens if Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos? Who knows what the halakha is? What? No. What happens if Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos? Let me tell you something better. The mitzvah of blowing shofar, according to the Torah, is mainly on the first day. The mitzvah of blowing shofar on the Torah is on the first day. Right?
Yeah.
Wait. The first day. The second day, blowing shofar is mitzvah abonim, according to the Chachamim, according to the stages. On the first day, the mitzvah is according to the Torah. When is Rosh Hashanah coming out this year? Shabbos. Why is it that the mitzvah is on the blowing shofar on the first day? Because that's when the judicial process takes place. It starts on the first day. No, it's not true. It's not true. Rosh Hashanah starts on the first day. Wait a minute. We're in big trouble this year. You know why? There's no shofar on Shabbos at all. There will be no shofar this first day of Rosh Hashanah, which means that when this court is open, there is no one up there saying anything. What? We are in big trouble. In very big trouble. You realize that this Rosh Hashanah is going to be a Rosh Hashanah without a shofar. Midirais, according to the Torah. Now, why don't we blow a shofar on Shabbos? Who said that? Who said that when Shabbos comes around, we don't blow a shofar? Who? The rabbis, the Chachamim, the sages of Israel said that. What? We need children to live, and you're telling me to take away what? The lifeline? It's like someone has a pacemaker, and someone comes over and rips it out. Why did the rabbis say, why did the Chachamim say that you're not supposed to blow shofar on Shabbos? Why? Is there something wrong with blowing shofar on Shabbos? There's nothing wrong with it. Because the thing is that what? We're afraid, the same thing in lunar ethic, but it's not so bad. We can be without the lunar ethic, but the way I showed it, without the shofar, you're gone. The point is, why did the Chachamim say, why did the sages say that you shouldn't blow shofar on Shabbos? Because they're afraid that maybe you'll pick it up, somebody will take it and walk outside into the street. Someone will walk outside and carry a shofar on Shabbos. You imagine that? So because of the possibility that somebody's going to carry a shofar on Shabbos, the Chachamim said, no shofar. No shofar. What is this? A death sentence? Because you're worried that someone's going to carry it out? That's a suffix. Maybe yeah, maybe not. But if I don't get a shofar on the first day, it's over. And that's a definite, that's a bana. That's certain. Whoever heard that a doubt should cancel a certainty? That's an amazing thing. An incredible thing. What do we see from this? You see an important thing. You see how powerful are the Chachamim. And you see that their power is so enormous that they can say, let me explain again. There are certain halachas in the Torah. The Torah says 630 mitzvahs. Over the years, the sages of Israel, who lived in the time of the Gemara, the Talmud, 2,000 years ago, went ahead and enacted many, many different laws that are called laws of the Rabbanim. I want you to understand this. This is a very, very important thing. The laws which are stipulated in the Torah itself, are the laws of the Torah. Okay? The laws that come from the sages of Israel are said to be the laws of the Rabbanim. Rabbanim means sages. Okay? The masters, rabbis. Okay? They added many of the laws they added to the Torah. How important are these laws? People have a tendency to say, well, the laws of the Chachamim, the laws of the sages are not that important. The main thing is the laws of the Torah. That's the critical thing, you see. The Torah says that you're allowed to daven Kriya Shema at night. The Torah says that you must say Kriya Shema twice a day. And you've got to say it in the morning and you've got to say it at night. How long could you say it at night? The Torah says you can say it until the dawn. Until the dawn. All night long you can say it. Comes along the Chachamim, and the Chachamim says, no, you can't say it after midnight. We say you can't say it after midnight. So we have a tendency to sit and think, who are these men that made these things? Who are these men that came up and told us what to do about the Torah? But their opinion. Their opinion. That's all. It's a nice opinion. Intelligent people. Wise men. Good counsel. Who has to listen to it? We have to listen to Torah. Right? No. Because the Torah says itself. The Torah says itself inside. And you should heed my guideline. Ushmatim is mishmati. And you should heed the fences against the law. The Torah says itself that in the generation of the Chachamim, that they have the right to amplify on the Torah, so to make sure that the halacha or the mitzvah in the Torah itself is not interfered with. They have the right to decree a halacha. They have the right to decree a halacha, even if it means negating a specific law in the Torah itself. If they feel that the essential spirit of the Torah will be undermined in other cases. And that's what they did on Rosh Hashanah. They said that if the Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbat, even the first day, forget it. No shofar. No shofar. So how is that Klal survived 1 year with a Rosh Hashanah that's on Shabbat? The answer is, because when the Chachamim come along and says no shofar, the Rebbeinu Shem says, I acknowledge that. Because I give them that power. And if I give them that power to say no shofar, then there will be a shofar, but that shofar will not be heard on earth. That shofar will be heard in the Shemayim. And our Avon still comes, you see. But from this we see the power of the Chachamim, that the Rebbeinu Shem listens to what the Chachamim say. That when there is a mitzvah from the sages, even if there's a mitzvah which is not in the Torah, that it is sacred to the Rebbeinu Shem as a law that He Himself said. How do we know that? Because if that was the case, the world would not have gone on after one Rosh Hashanah that fell out on a Shabbos.
That's right, so that's the proof.
You understand what I'm saying? Why is the world still here? Rosh Hashanah has come out on a Shabbos many, many times. Why are we still here? Why are we only in exile? Why are we destroyed? Why isn't it worse? Because obviously, somebody did blow a shofar. Somebody did blow a shofar where? In the Shemayim. And the Rebbeinu Shem listened to that shofar. The Rebbeinu Shem listened to the Rabbanon. This shows you the importance and the sanctity of the mitzvah Rabbanon. That you shouldn't say that just because the Rabbanon said something and the Torah didn't say it, it's a minor thing, we don't have to listen to it. The Rebbeinu Shem heeds what the Rabbanon said, so that He will allow the world to continue, even though the shofar is not blown on that day. Because He told the Rabbanon, through the Torah, to enact decrees that make it easier to maintain the Torah, and do not invade or interfere with the spirit of the Torah. And since the authority of the Chachamim, the authority of the sages of Israel, comes from the Rebbeinu Shem Himself, comes from the Torah itself, the Rebbeinu Shem is the one who listens to what they say. And the Chachamim, in their wisdom, understood that it is better not to blow a shofar on a Rosh Hashanah, which comes on the Shabbat. Because what? Because somebody will go out and be Mechal Shabbat, and that will be worse. Somebody will take the shofar itself and become Mechal Shabbat. So what happens to the shofar? If somebody takes the very instrument of chesed, if someone takes the sign of the Akedah itself and Mechal Shabbos with the thing itself, what is that going to do? It'll be worse. It's worse. It'll be worse to be Mechal Shabbos, to go against the Shabbos with the shofar, than not to have the shofar at all. And the Rebbeinu Shem says, I consent. So it is. I will just have the shofar blown in the minor, up there, but not down here. So it's the second thing that we see. And we will have this year Rosh Hashanah on a shofar. Who? It's not blown in this way, it's blown in this. The shofar is blown in the Shemayim, not in a physical sense. You see. Because what it is that the shofar, in essence, arouses Avon to come into this court and demand his justice. So the spiritual counterpart of that shofar, that shefa, that court which lies in the shofar, is represented in a spiritual way in that Shemayim. And that arouses Avon. It's not an actual physical blowing itself. Yes?
The first Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of Adam Rishon, who was created within this concept of din. But also that same day, Rosh Hashanah was the Chad of Adam Rishon, and he was saved by the Hanagas Yichud. So it would seem to me that even when Adam Rishon had no shofar, without even
what happened before?
But it seems to me within the day Rosh Hashanah there would be some very strong hashpah of the Hanagas Yichud, even without the shofar, that the shofar might work together with. But it seems to me that element would be there.
Yes. Things had altered. I mean, the question is, what happened to the world before Avram came on the scene? You see. That's a very, very difficult question to answer. But obviously the Hanogat HaYichud was in a different type of format. So that the shofar was either represented by something else or wasn't necessary. And because of the fact that the generations descended further and it became worse and worse, new instruments of redemption were required. But the exact answer to that question is not clear to me.
It would seem they would work together, though.
Yes.
In a certain sense. Yeah.
Now it's funny. I have told you what the essence of Rosh Hashanah is, which is what? The essence of Rosh Hashanah is what? Is that this bezin is closed and that one's open. What is the essence of Yom Kippur? The essence of Yom Kippur is that this bezin is closed and that one's open.
Is there someone that brings mishpat into the other basin on Yom
No. There is no shofar for the Chus of the Satan. Nobody's looking out for the Satan. No. So Yom Kippur is the inverse of Rosh Hashanah. The inverse. Now, how do they manage that? How does the Rebbeinu Shalom manage to shut that bezin and keep that one open? Stay tuned next week.
Same time.
Yes.
I guess two questions. One, does that mean that Hesed was normally present during the day, is not present on Rosh Hashanah in the morning? Like the day is divided into different.
That's not right. That's right. It's not present in a judicial process. It's there, but it's not. There's no bezin. There's no actual procedure that's going on attempting to give Klal Yisrael chesed directly.
And I heard that these prayers are in Aramaic, which is done because the angels cannot understand Aramaic, and so your prayers go directly to Hashem. Is there any
some of them? Well, that depends. It's also not. It depends. It's also true to some extent. But this is the critical process here. Yes.
So why do we blow shofar on Yom Kippur?
There is no mitzvah to blow shofar in Yom Kippur except at the end.
Why do they do that?
Because shofar, in that case, the shofar is blown for a whole different reason that has to do with Yovel. Because a long time ago, and it has to do with other things, they used to blow the shofar on the Yovel, and it used to symbolize other things. The shofar.
They have the same, like you said before.
Yes, the shofar on Yom Kippur is not the same as the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The shofar on Yom Kippur has nothing to do with remembrance of that Kedis Yitzhak. It has to do with announcing the Shemitah and Yovel and certain things that happened in those times, you see.
So the shvarim is really...
Well, yeah, we mimic the one from Rosh Hashanah, but the Yom Kippur has a different set of mitzvahs. The set of mitzvahs on Yom Kippur is fasting. It's a whole different thing. On Rosh Hashanah, it's shofar. And that's it.
Where did Yitzchak? First of all, when Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov come on that day, I have two questions, so don't shut me up. On Rosh Hashanah, he's so busy there. Does he still come to us every year?
Who?
Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they come on Shabbos to us with the meals and everything.
Well,
now where does Yitzchak fit into this picture?
Well, Yitzchak is with Avram in the birth. The Akedah Yitzchak is both Avram and Yitzchak. Both of them went to the Akedah. They both have that son.
Oh, they both.
Both. It's a like father-son.
Oh, then they're both there.
Testimony. Yes.
I still don't understand how could there be any Beis-Din on Shabbos? Because Beis-Din is, it's just the idea of Beis-Din, of mitzvah. How can it be on Shabbos?
Beis-Din Shemata can't be on Shabbos, but Beis-Din Shemala is something different. I mean, Rosh Hashanah comes on Shabbos, it's still Rosh Hashanah.
I know.
Still on Shabbos. Yes?
Explain why it is that the whole world is judged on Rosh Hashanah and not just the Yidden on Rosh Hashanah.
Because if the Yidden are judged, it's the following. If the Goyim are judged, that doesn't mean that the Yidden are judged. But if the Jews are judged, then everyone is judged. Because the existence of all the world is connected to the Jews. The Jews, since they took over the essence of Adam, and they are the essential processors of Olam Haba, everything is connected to them. If they succeed, everything succeeds. If they fail, everything fails. And I told you a medrash a long time ago, this is an amazing medrash, and the medrash says that if the Goyim realize that everything which happens in the world, all the famines and plagues and stock market crashes and wars and everything that goes on in the world are because of the Jews, If the Goyim understood it, they would assign 2 soldiers to every Jew and force them to keep the Torah. The message says, and that's why. Why is it all because of the Jews? Because the Jews have the central core. They are the central core of all the prophecies. Because they have retained the ultimate objective of Adam, Rishon. You see. Hence everything. When they're judged, everyone is judged.
What about us in terms of understanding this? But can you suggest anything in terms of our Shema or anything that we can do in a special way?
We should realize, well, that's what I'm saying. When we hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, first of all,
we're not going to hear it.
What am I saying all this for?
When do we know He comes?
What am I saying all this for? So that you should realize, first of all, what Rosh Hashanah is. When you walk into shul on Rosh Hashanah, you should be frightened. Literally frightened.
That's what I mean.
Because when you walk into shul on Rosh Hashanah, they are judging you. Your name is coming up. And the determination will be made what will happen to you. It is being determined whether or not you will be married if you are single, or whatever the situation, whether you will live or die. Everything is being determined on that day. That is an awesome, awesome day. They are determining what kind of job you will have, how much parnasa you will have. Everything is being determined on that day. Therefore, it is a frightening day. And it is more frightening because there is no bezdin of mercy on that day. Which means that you are literally under the confines of pure justice. When you hear the shofar, you should realize the tremendous chesed and the tremendous schut and the power of Avon Yitzchak, what they did, how they saved Klal Yisrael, and the chesed that the Baruch Shem allows us to use that mitzvah all the time, so that we can bring in this mercy.
But we're not
even in the judicial process.
If we're not going to hear it, is it read?
You'll hear it the second day.
Oh. So will it be...
Okay. Unfortunately... Okay, I don't know what
I know you much deeper than I do, but what I've seen is an amazing human being who runs around doing everything for everyone and then disappears before they ever have a chance to say thank you on purpose. And it's just so wonderful to share your simcha, which is such a great simcha. Last night was the beginning of so many wonderful things for you. Hashem should just bless you that way. And they say that the chuppah and the wedding party set the tone for the whole life of the bride and groom. And if that's what's coming down, it's amazing. So I want to thank you personally, and at least once for everyone, although they'll all have their own, I'm sure, but for so much learning and light and beauty and knowledge and everything else that you've given over in just the essence of who you are. And that it's so wonderful to see that smiling face. I wish I could say something to her. Somehow you'll convey that I said that. But I wish you many, many long, happy, wonderful years together, healthy years with beautiful children. We should be very soon at Yisrael, where we all follow. And L'chaim.
I just want to say a small piece of Torah. You have to say a piece of Torah at the Shir of Rachas. That whole Shir before didn't count. he wouldn't come right away, we should have started Shevach and
Yeah.
that's the way they get a double cheer, you know. But just very basically, I think it's very propitious. It's unusual that this is the last week of the year, the last year of this year, Tavshin Mem Vav. And I think it's very befitting that we have a Sheva Brachot to Misameh Chassan V'Kala. And the reason why I think it's very fitting is because I think it's a very good simon for next year. I don't know if you know, it says Oidi Shema Bar Yehuda Kol Chassan V'Kol Chassan V'Kol Kala. What we find is that it says Oidi Shema, there again will be heard in the streets of Yerushalayim the songs of rejoicing and of Chassan Kala. What does it mean, Oidi Shema? It again will be heard. So the way we all basically understand is that Yerushalayim was destroyed with the Churban Beit HaMikdash, so there has never really been the sound of a wedding, or a truly joyous wedding. And there will come a time in Yemot Mashiach when Yerushalayim will be restored, that Oid Yishama, again we will hear the rejoicing, a true wedding, without the chassan having to break the jar.
Amen.
But there's another meaning to Oid Yishama, which is a deeper meaning, and it's a full meaning. Oid Yishama means that there again will be heard the rejoicing of the chassan and kala. And who really is the chassan and kala? The chassan and kala is Chal Yisrael and the Rabboni Shalom. The Rabboni Shalom is considered the chassan on Shavuot. You know, on Shavuot you go around 7 times, and at least by the Ashkenazim wedding, you go around 7 times because on Shavuot, when the Rabboni Shalom gave the Torah to Chal Yisrael, it was like the chassan, the bridegroom, having betrothing the maidens, and Shavuot is the same thing where the Rabboni Shalom betrothed Klal Yisrael, and the two chassan and kala is really the Rabboni Shalom and Klal Yisrael, because that is the real relationship which we will find in Yemot Mashiach. So I would like to say that when it says Oid Yishama Bar Yehuda, it means that again we will hear, just like we heard by Matan Torah and Har Sinai, the beginning of the chassan and kala, because that was the first